Good day, everyone. Welcome to another live roundtable of DevOps Unbound. For those of you who are not familiar, DevOps Unbound is a bi-weekly, meaning every other week, video show that we produce here at Techstrong TV in partnership with our friends and sponsors at Tricentis, worldwide leader in automated testing. And then like once a month or so, we do this version of DevOps Unbound, a live roundtable version, where in addition to having a fantastic panel as we always do, we really open things up by opening it to you, our audience, to help drive the conversation. Before I get into today's session and our panel, let me talk a little bit about to you, our audience. And I realize some of you maybe are just joining. We love having you involved. We want you involved. If you look at your web browser on the right hand side, you'll see your communication, your big market communication window. And for most of you, it defaults right into chat and public. If you type in there, everyone in public, everyone can see what you typed. It's all good. If you put a question in there, we will try to answer it. We may answer it at the panel wide level. We may answer it directly to you in chat. If you put it in chat, anybody can answer it. It may not be someone on the panel even, but so much the better. If you have a question directly for the panel that we'd like to raise to the whole panel level, please go to the Q&A section of that communication window. So up top where it says chat, right to the right of it, grayed out for most of you, it'll say Q&A. If you click on that, you can see that you can put in your questions there for the whole audience. What we have found, and we're doing this now almost, I think, 2 years. What we have found in 2 years of doing this is that the more audience participation we have, the better this show is. So if you've got questions, you've got comments, you have thoughts, don't be shy, put them in. Why don't we kick it off? I see some people, we've got people from New York, some people from LA, so we're already bi-coastal. But we usually get people from all over the world. I know there's got to be some folks out from India here, from Europe perhaps, in the UK. We've got Virginia. Come on, tell us where you're from. It's always one of the fun things about being on the internet is seeing who's here. Next up, though, I wanted to introduce you to our panel members. But I think before I do that, quick word, or what are we discussing today on DevOps Unbound? Quality engineering, the future of software testing quality, and of the future of software testing, excuse me. Quality engineering focuses on the prevention, detection, and remediation of digital experience issues. And that's a mouthful. We could be talking about user experience, security, any number of things that fall under this broad umbrella of what we're calling quality. We're going to explore it some more with our panel and with you. Let me now get to our panel. First up, I want to introduce you to, it's actually his first time on a live roundtable, on our live roundtable anyway. So let's go easy on him. But let me introduce you to Lee Atkinson. Lee, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And don't go easy on me. That's fine.
All right. Lee, what about maybe giving folks a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I'm a software architect by training. I spent 7 years with Amazon as helping to build their service-oriented architecture back in the Amazon retail part of the organization back in the early 2000s, and then moved to AWS and helped build the Elastic Beanstalk service. Then I moved on to New Relic and spent 7-8 years with New Relic. I'm now mostly an author and a writer. I've got 2 books with O'Reilly Media. Architecture for Scale is my main book, and my second book, Overcoming IT Complexity, is coming out this year, still yet this year. And I also write a lot of articles. I write a weekly article with Container Journal, and I write for InfoWorld and Diginomica and other places. And I do a lot of training courses with LinkedIn Learning, and I'm coming up with my own training academy sometime next year.
Fantastic. And Lee, welcome, and it's a pleasure having you on. So as much as it's Lee's first time, our next guest, he's a mainstay for us here. He's always here to help out and lend his thoughts. I want to introduce you to Adam Kelsey, if I
Hi.
got that right.
Absolutely. Hi. I lead our developer relations and internal platform products here at Tricentis, and I'm mainly focused on making developers awesome and making sure that that what we build is high quality and useful to the world.
Absolutely. Our third panel member really needs no introduction to our DevOps Unbound audience either. She's the host of Techstrong Women, as well as a frequent guest on many of our webinars and panels. And she's also a board member of the Open SSF, former board member on the CDF, CEO, founder of Deploy Hub, uh, progenitor of an open source project with CDF. Aurelius, if I didn't mess,
Ortelius.
Ortelius, who is
Ortelius.
who mapped out. Well,
The
she can
world.
tell you. Right, Tracy Reagan. Tracy, I tried. Go ahead.
Okay, you did fine. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Testing is actually where I sort of cut my teeth after I decided I didn't want to code anymore. And it started when I had some code going into production that was old. And I just said, what happened in that process? And I realized it was a bad build. And that's how I started my first company. So I've been doing this for quite some time. Lifecycle management has always been a passion. And I continue to do it, and super happy to be here and having this discussion.
Absolutely. So, guys, when I think about quality as it relates to software, as it relates to testing and security, I'm reminded of that commercial where they used to have the little kid who would come on and say, "Yeah, I want to be obsolete by the time I'm 35." And, yeah, I want to be in a dead end job, blah, 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 blah. And it's the same thing. I've never met a developer. I've never met a tester. I've never met a security or ops or admin who raises their hand and says, "Oh, yeah, I want to develop low quality software, right? I want to release something that's just bug ridden and terrible, right?" We all have pride in what we do and what we turn out in our work product. Unfortunately, as we all can testify, we've all been in the industry a long time. You know what? I'm going to stop us right there. I forgot to introduce my co-host as I usually do because I'm old and adult. Let me introduce Mitchell Ashley, who's my co-host and CTO here at Techstrong. Mitchell, I apologize.
No worries. I was helping load a poll question and talking to the audience. So glad to be here, CTO with Techstrong Group and partner with Alan. Wonderful panel. So let's jump in now.
All right, thanks, Mitchell. So as I was so excited to jump into this. So no one wants to deliver crappy code. No one wants to deliver, something that their name's on and they're not proud of it. But yet here we are. There's been plenty of crappy code and bug-ridden software that has, been released. Where's the disconnect? Right? Let's not blame all the testers. Or should we? Right? Is testing the gatekeeper of quality? QA, quality assurance. Is that the same as quality engineering? Right? Are they synonymous? I don't know. Adam, since you work at Tricentis and they're the testing company, I'm going to ask you the hard question here. Are they synonymous? What are we doing?
No, so I think quality engineering, I think, has two different meanings. One is to point out that quality is an engineering discipline, and that in that sense, then quality assurance and the testers and such is part of quality engineering. But we need to treat that part of the engineering process as an engineering discipline and not just we let the testers do that and hand that over to them. The other meaning of the phrase is that quality is something that has to be baked into the software, that you can't test your way into good software. You have to engineer it in from the start. And so it's everything. It's not just testing, it's how you design. It's secure by design. It's privacy by design. It's how you monitor and manage and maintain and operate the software as well.
Fair enough.
You can't kludge bad software to make it better. Is
No.
one way to put that, right?
Well, and if the software is bad, all the testing in the world isn't going to fix it.
Right.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, as someone in testing once told me, testing doesn't make the software quality. Just testing shows us if it's how crappy it is or how good it is, right? Don't shoot the messenger there. But it's not testing in and of itself is not the producer or the author of quality. It's just testing it for quality. You know, Tracy, if I were a psychoanalyst, I would say there was something deep in what you said when you said, well, earlier in my career, when what were the words? I got tired of coding, or I was done coding.
I did get
became
tired
a
of
tester,
coding.
and I became a tester. Okay, let's talk about this.
Well, what happened was I would get code that went to production that was basically old code. And I know that it wasn't the tester's fault for missing it. And I found it went all the way to the users. And so I started looking at the life cycle of testing. And I want to say that we really need to disrupt the persona around testing. We think about software testing, and oftentimes we think about people just hammering on a keyboard. I have so many good stories about testing. It's hilarious. But there's one story, I call it the fat man in the boardroom. I was working for UPS, and we were doing a massive implementation of their software, all of their feeder system. And they had all these truck drivers come in, and we were supposed to do user testing. And the first user came over, turned the keyboard over, and sat on it. And of course, I got the. And his point was, you have to build the software strong enough for truck drivers because we do really dumb things. Now, what he said was, there's chaos in software, and I started thinking about that. And in my world, I said the very first place that we really should be putting testing is in the software build process. It's the very first step. And when we think about quality engineering, and we've done it for a very long time, we've maybe just not labeled it. I'm surprised it hasn't become test ops. But
I think someone took that name already, but go ahead.
It did, okay. But when we think about quality in digital products, we're thinking about every aspect of that digital product, from its birth, from the requirements. We could have mistakes in requirements. We can have mistakes in the build. We can have mistakes in the code. We can have mistakes in the key value pairs we pass to the cluster that's going to run it. There are anomalies across the entire life cycle. And testing is that exercise of creating quality in every single aspect of the life cycle, not just the testers who get it and have test scripts that they're running or they automate it. That is such a small aspect of quality engineering. So I feel like when we talk about quality engineering, it has to be broad.
But is it creating quality or is it testing for quality? And I think, and that may sound, like semantics, but I think it's an important distinction. I don't think testing creates quality. I think testing tests for quality and verifies.
I think it verifies too. I would say that too. But the point is, in quality engineering, we're addressing the entire life cycle, not just the last part when the software's delivered and you have people pounding on it.
Yep. Mitch, you were going to say something?
Ford used to have this slogan, quality is job one, and whether that was true or what all went with that. But the philosophy was that every person along the process, from the initial design of a car all the way through to the very end, was responsible for quality. And that's the way you make sure you have a quality product, is you have everybody is responsible for quality. Quality is their most important thing they need to worry about all the way through the process. You can't postpone it to the end. It's a process change throughout the entire food chain of a software product or an automobile. It doesn't matter. It's a process all the way through the system.
Lee, that reminds me of a while back, there was the Fruit of the Loom commercial, Inspector 12. right? That was the last person before it shipped that said this was a quality product. And that's sort of that checking it idea versus building in quality, right? There's the idea
Right.
of quality doesn't happen once. It's through continuous repetitive improvements, a lot of small improvements, sometimes some big ones, but it's created as part of what you create, not something you find. Well, you do find if it's there or not at the end, but you're not going to prove it that way. That's for sure. Yeah, Alan, I just want to mention we have a poll question too. Do you want to put that up about?
Sure, let's run with it. So,
Great.
guys in the audience, we'd love to hear you putting your thoughts on this. What is the difference between QA, quality assurance, and quality engineering? No difference at all. It's a cultural shift. Quality engineering is much broader than quality assurance. Quality engineering requires more automation. And if you want to put it in there,
Great. Love to have everybody join in. We're getting a few. Should have our Jeopardy music. We have our Jeopardy contest.
I'm anxious to see what people think about the difference between B and C. I'd love to get people to put into the chat or into QA about what they see the differences between
right,
B
why
and
they
C.
picked one or the other. Because right now, B
exactly.
and C are running pretty close by to each other, C edging it out a little bit. But
and I looked at those two and was like, well, what's really the difference here? And I know there is a difference, but I'd love to hear what people think.
Here you go.
Yep.
Here's the audience reaction.
So yeah, if you wouldn't mind, put in chat why you voted one way or the other, and we can discuss that. I can tell you, I picked it's broader because I think it almost transcends culture. You know, one of the things that one of the reasons I got into DevOps was security and what's become known as DevSecOps. And one of the tenets of DevSecOps that I've always preached is security is everyone's responsibility. Well, you know what? So is quality. And maybe that is a cultural thing, but it's so much broader in my mind than just quality assurance, which to me, I hear quality assurance and I'm thinking I'm doing testing. Right? I'm assuring that the quality is what we expect it to be. Cody's put in here. He posed a question. Go ahead, go Lee.
So I took a different tact. I absolutely see what you were thinking, and I was thinking the same thing about broader, and thinking of doing broader. But I chose cultural shift, and part of that is, I talk about STOSO, which is the model that I promote in my practice for how you manage services in a service-oriented architecture in an organization that runs a service-based application. And the whole premise there is an individual team, like the Amazon 2 pizzas style team, is responsible for everything having to do for that service, from designing it to building it to testing it, to quality to security to operational aspect to picking up the pager when it goes off in the middle of the night. All of that is the responsibility of that team, and that team is like 6 to 8 people. So ownership is the key. I consider the ownership is a cultural shift. There's the throw over the wall to the next phase in the process is a surefire way for things to be missed and skipped. But when you have owners of individual pieces and own it top to bottom, soup to nuts, everything having to do with it, that's a cultural change in most companies. And that cultural change is what it really takes to make sure that your system stays operational, scalable, high quality, secure, all of those things.
You mentioned security. There's an analogy that makes sense to me is you don't build a car and then add airbags when you're done, right? All of that is part of safety is designed into the product. Quality is designed into the product as well. There's a really great question in the Q&A someone posed about we're always getting hit for more features. And anytime we want to work on quality, they say, well, but we want features. So it's not a feature you work on for quality. It's got to be the whole process that you use. And like I said earlier about that incremental improvement, you're not going to do it in one step.
Yeah, and so
quality isn't a feature. Quality is just is. It's
well,
something
and
you
to
need to
that,
be part of your philosophy.
the QA question they're asking, well, what do you do when they're asking for features
Exactly.
and you're just building quality and you want to add quality in? You have to be building the features with quality from the beginning. It's not a process of adding something later. It's not a process of this is extra work. It's part of the work. It's part of the engineering. And if you're not looking at it as that, you end up with, okay, I built this and now let me go and harden it later. And that's where we see companies that do anti-patterns like, okay, well, we'll have a hardening sprint before release, or if you're not baking that quality in, you're going to run into that where customers or other stakeholders are saying, okay, well, why are we spending the time on this? Why are we spending the time on security, on design, on anything else? You build it in from the very beginning.
So
I got into a Twitter discussion just yesterday with someone who was talking about they don't have time, or they don't have a large enough of an organization to have service-oriented architecture split up and all those things, and it's like it's too much work. I can't do that because I have to do all these features. I have to do these features, and nothing's more important. I can't think about scaling. I can't think about quality. All I need to think about is building these features, and that just brings you technical debt. That's what that does. It's
a cop-out.
may not
Tracy,
need to
you
think
had
about these
something.
things today.
Well, first of all, I want to thank participant 440 for asking that question. And we have to listen to that question. And the question says, hey, I'm a developer who's being pushed code, and end users want this software. How do I build quality into that? And that is such a valid point. And it's been a valid point for the last 30 years in software development. And it will always be the problem. So I go back to the whole idea of what can we automate to make sure that the quality is in there that has nothing to do with a line of code that might have been bad. I mean, I think if we really looked at the stats, and I don't know this for sure, but it's not just lines of code that are bad that causes quality issues. There are so many other things that can be offensive and create anomalies along the life cycle. So the more that we can automate, the more tooling that we can bring in, the fewer scripts that we have that builds out our pipeline, the fewer scripts that we use to build our code, and the fewer scripts that we use to deploy code, the more elevated we have is the data that we need to make sure that we are baking quality into our process in terms of delivery. So those developers aren't always blamed for a line of code that's wrong, because that one is fairly easy to fix. It's usually caught somewhere along the line in user or acceptance testing. But if it's not, it's not the end of the world. It's something that's fairly easy to fix if our pipeline is running properly and we have quality baked into that. And I think that we're starting to have those conversations around both testing and security. And we're going to start looking more at policies. What's the data? There's so much data out there that we don't pull into our process. It's left underneath the DevOps pipeline. It's left in chat sessions or Discord channels where people are talking about experiences they had and problems they had. And none of that data is being brought into a central place so we can start doing proper machine learning and AI to really make quality a baked-in process of the life cycle. And I don't blame a single developer if they make a code mistake, because I know I made plenty. But if we can get code fixes out fast and the rest of the stuff is working properly, then we have a pretty clean system.
Absolutely. But look, I'm probably the least technical person on this panel today. But I've been around developers and engineers for a long, long time. And it's a consistent message I hear from them is that the pressure to deliver code is the antithesis of delivering quality. And hey, I got to get those features done. I got to deliver X lines of code, and I don't have time for security. I don't have time for quality. They'll fix that in testing, right? And I'll be honest with you, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. If you have pride in what you're doing, you don't want to deliver shoddy work product. If you know you're delivering shoddy work product and you're still doing that job, I ask, why don't you become a tester like Tracy did or something, right? I mean, what does that, Mitch? You know, we've talked about this before. Thoughts on that, and then we have another QA question thing here and some great comments.
Yeah, what I would share is, there was maybe not too long ago a point in time where testing all happened at the end, and what always happened is time got squeezed and the amount of time left for testing got shorter and shorter. Same thing for security, and so you just did whatever you could get done at the end and you shipped, right? And kind of like security, as we shift testing left and we do more automation, we do testers do testing or built-in testing, test-driven development, things like that. I think there's hope of building testing into more quality into our software process, as Tracy was talking about, kind of the systemic view of it. So it's never going to get done at the end. That'll never solve it. And to your point, Alan, you have pride in what your work is, and so you have to work on the process as well as writing the application or whatever software that you're building.
Quality engineering is also more than just about testing. It's more than about verifying that what you've done is working. It's even more than what we're talking about everybody taking pride in it and making sure you're building it in. One of the trends that I've seen is that more and more development teams and organizations are using methods other than testing to ensure quality and to everything from code reviews and mob programming and observability after the fact when you're deploying and red-green deployments and all these different ways that we're making sure that our software works as intended. It's not just about testing. And I think quality engineering is all of that. How do I track what errors are happening in production? And we look at things like the P90 and P95 rates of things. How do I know when those have reached that threshold, and what do they mean, and what caused it to go there? And all of that stuff is about quality engineering. That's all about building quality into your product, and making sure that you have a quality product even after the fact, and it's not testing at all.
And remember, a lot of companies, if they're checking their code into Git, they'll do code reviews for 1 or 2 lines of code to try to catch that. So I always take the approach that everybody comes from a good intent. And I believe that most individuals believe in that they're doing the best that they can, even though they may say, I didn't have time to test, which happens. It just does. But the more that we can automate, the more that we can streamline the process and think about quality engineering as that broader, solving a problem from a broader view and capturing it, implementing those policies. You're going to have 2 code reviews when you get a Git check-in before it goes into the build. That's a first level of defense. It has nothing to do with testing itself. It's just giving, more eyes on the code to make sure that somebody doesn't see something that the original coder didn't see, which in my day, we didn't have that ability. I really, really wish we could have, because it's a feedback loop. So how do we create that feedback loop in so many locations of the process? I think that will improve the quality overall.
Guys, we've got something
Something else we haven't talked about.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Lee.
Sorry. Something else we haven't talked about yet is the development environmental as well as the production environments. Chaos testing. It's one of the things that we talked a lot about at Amazon back in the day, and I think it's being used more and more now with certainly Netflix promoted this heavily, is to create as much of a chaotic environment as possible within your production systems, let alone your development environments, so that as an engineer, when you build something, you're building it into an environment that it has to be quality or it doesn't work at all. so many software developers build in a vacuum, right? And they build something that worked once. It worked on my desktop, so now I'll ship it. And that's part of this mentality of I can do a lot of features and get them out, but they just won't be quality. But if you're, excuse me, your entire process of how you build it, how you test it, how you deploy it, how you deal with the entire infrastructure all the way through and including production is a chaotic environment, you get used to having to build in quality features. You get used to having to think about quality from day one and have that in your entire process as you go along. That's part of the cultural change. But I think that environmental impact of building in, it's a cruel world out there, so make sure your software works is an important way to do it. And Alan, you talked about DevSecOps. That's extremely important for DevSecOps because that builds security into the product as well from the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely. You know, one of our participants put in here the difference between QA and QE, right? The QE is to engineer the quality into the product, and the QA is to ensure that the product has the right level of quality to ship. I like that. I like that I think that's dead on in terms of I think the difference between the QE and the QA role part there. You know, someone else wrote about SOA and some proactive SOA and some new stuff coming out of IEE. I mean, obviously, quality engineering and quality control, there's a nexus between them. There is a connection. They're just, I think one of the most important things we want to take out of here is they're not necessarily one and the same. But they are in fact connected to that. Something else that popped up was this notion of, and Lee, you mentioned it with chaos, but it's not just the code, right? We live in such a shift-lefted world, right, where we think it's all about the code and all about deployment. But you know, infrastructure has something to say there, and when we talk about the quality of our applications, the quality of what we deliver, we can't lose sight. And you know, and today SRE, platform engineering, is a very big thing. We can't lose sight of the fact that this code has to run somewhere, whether it's serverless or cloud native or what have you. And so software code doesn't exist in a vacuum when you have to run it on platforms. And so our quality has to extend there as well. To a certain extent, with the advent of the three large, public cloud providers, and we run stuff on public cloud, have we abdicated our responsibility for quality of those environments to Amazon or Microsoft or Google? I don't,
Well, that's part of the principle of shared responsibility, right?
Yep.
The principle of shared responsibility says that the cloud provider has responsibility for certain aspects of the entire tech stack, and you have responsibility for everything else. And so it's your responsibility to make sure you understand exactly what the cloud provider is responsible for, and you are responsible for everything else. It applies to security, but also applies just to general quality and general infrastructure.
Yeah.
And data is, and I'm going to go back to harp on that data. Each organization, if you really want to start, baking in quality, however we want to describe it, doing quality engineering, every organization should be looking at where the bugs are coming from. Where are the anomalies? Is it in the testing? Is it in the deployment? Is it in the infrastructure? Every time we do a deployment and there's problems, a new release gets pushed out, where did the problem occur? Because if you do that, you're able to look to see what teams have done really great jobs of building in their quality and what teams are struggling. But without the numbers, without the data, it's hard to make decisions about how you can begin improving the quality within your organization, because every single organization's culture is different and they have new and different problems.
There's those
Don't disagree.
stats that say that the later you find a bug, the more expensive it is to fix, and so testing earlier and makes it cheaper to deliver. But the cheapest bug to fix at all is the one that never existed to begin with.
That's a great that's a great point, right? But I guess it's a bug you never saw at the testing level, right? But how? So we've seen all these tools that are sort of testing the software literally as you're writing the code. It's testing the code, right? There are some folks doing that now. But bugs are, I mean, I don't want to call them bugs even, mistakes or, not.
They're just
not
anomalies.
Yeah, I mean, stuff happens.
Yes, exactly.
Well, sometimes they're missed features or features that you thought a customer wanted and the customer wanted a different feature, and that's a bug, right?
Yeah. But
and a lot of the time the issue isn't that the software isn't working as it was designed. The issue is that your design was bad to begin with.
Right.
My wife uses a piece of software that prints labels on things, and they're continually saying, "Oh, there's a problem with your labels. The UPC code is off the edge of the label." Well, it's because they're choosing to print right up against the edge of that label. So something's slightly out of alignment. It's working by design. Testing says, yes, it's printing. It's printing exactly where we intended it to print. It's just the wrong place, and it's not the right thing to do for the user.
And it could be
That's
the
part of
printer's
the
configuration.
entire process, and the entire process begins with the original idea for why we want to build software in the first place, all the way through the product development, the design, the architecture, everything, all the way through to the very end. And problems can occur everywhere in that process. How many products failed simply because it was the wrong product at the wrong time? That's a bug. That's a quality issue.
Yeah.
And that starts way at the requirements level, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So again, how do you see it across the board? But in Adam's example, there could have been just simply a configuration of the printer. If the printer was printing it in the wrong place. And I'm going to keep pushing that, because when we talk about testing, I hate to just focus on the software and the developer's code and what was compiled and linked and sitting on somebody's machine and that they're hitting and pounding on. Because from my experience and my years in testing, it wasn't often that problem. One of the biggest bugs that we ever had to chase down was it was in the build, and a library was linked on the wrong boundaries. And every time you try to bring up the application, you'd get what we used to call the OS2 tombstone. Now, that took us a long time to find. It wasn't anybody's bad code. It wasn't any bad deployment. It was simply a tiny little parameter in somebody's build script that they passed over, and then somebody else consumed it, and it got copied 100 times across the organization that had that wrong boundary link, and that caused the problem. So there are tiny little details in this process, the tiniest, most ridiculous little details. And oftentimes we lose quality in those tiny little details. So it's not just the software. It is how the software is configured and how it's, and then, tools like infrastructure as code was a movement. That is a quality effort, right? That is a quality engineering effort, because what we're doing is we're saying we're going to take the infrastructure's configuration, we're going to put it in a file that we can now check into something like Git, and we can start doing code reviews on our infrastructure configuration. That is baking quality engineering into the process, even though the Terraform people would never want to be heard as quality engineering tools, right? They're an infrastructure tool, but they are working to make infrastructure more secure. I hate to use the word more secure, but certainly improve the quality, because one person didn't log into the environment and make the changes on their own, and nobody has any idea what happened and why now applications don't run the way they should, and you have all this degradation, and nobody can bring up their the basic screens. So again, we really have to think about, when we talk about quality engineering, it's not just software, it's not just programmers, it is the entire gambit from the day that we sit down and decide to build the software to when the user logs in. And there's a lot of pieces in between.
I want to also highlight participant, I don't know, 313 at the bottom of their comment said something. I'm interested in the panel's reaction to it, which is that adding quality adds more time to delivery. And you know what? That little nugget right there, that's the crux of the whole thing. Does quality actually add more time to delivery?
It saves time.
As counterintuitive, I think I agree with you, Lee, but
Yeah.
but nevertheless, I think that's the prevailing notion, that adding quality adds more time to this.
It
Adam,
adds
what
more
do you think?
time. It adds more time.
That's
in the
why it's a
same sense
cultural
that-
change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it adding quality adds more time in the same sense that stopping at the gas station takes more time until you run out of gas, and now you're walking.
And then you have all the time in the world. Yeah.
And everybody's experience is their own, and it may be in the case with that particular listener has had that experience, and their quality process is just getting in the way, and it's really not catching anything. And I've seen that happen as well. So that could be the case, but in general, if you really are committed to building a more a pipeline of software delivery, not just deployment, but from requirements to user sign-on. If you're building it in and automating it, it saves a lot of time. It saves a ton of time because you're not having to spend those late nights looking for why a build or why something isn't running, and it's because something was linked on the wrong boundary, which is a horrible experience. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
And Tracy, if I could expand on that a little bit too, I think something else that I've certainly seen in my career is that it's the entire organization has to be part of this process. And if you're an engineer and you get what we're talking about, but your management doesn't, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're never going to have the opportunity to build quality in. You're going to be asked, where's that new feature? How come they're taking so long? Joe's writing software faster than you. Why aren't you writing software faster? And that's the culture you're in, and that's hurting you, your company, and your opportunities there. This has to be a cultural change throughout the organization, and you can't do this on your own if your organization is not behind it.
I agree with that. I also think it can start at one team at a time. It is
Absolutely, sure.
right. So it might be hard for one person to change the whole system, but a bigger part of the system, but still small, can take steps towards that. And if those improvements show value, people will glom onto it, right? People will adopt it. So there are ways of kind of
I
bottom up.
absolutely agree, but I think what I'm seeing in some of the participants here are people who sounds like they feel like it's not their choice, and it's they can't make the decision on their own. They need support to make that happen. And maybe that support is management, maybe it's other teams, maybe it's your manager, maybe it's your teammates, but you can't do it on your own. You need help. You need support to make it happen. You can't build quality in if you don't have the infrastructure that's helping you make that happen.
Quality is a team sport.
And you have to have the upper management who's willing to put the money into looking at how to build out the pipeline stronger, add the tooling, reduce all of the manual efforts that can cause the quality issues. So it has to come from somebody above. And I want to, kind of shift this conversation a little bit, but, as an open source community director for Ortelius, we don't get a lot of testers contributing. Which I think is really odd, because in an open, and there's a lot of developers who learn coding in the open source world, but we don't have testing mentors to start teaching about what their experience is with the software and creating the feedback loop. So if you're a tester out there, consider becoming part of an open source community and elevate your craft. It is an important skill. If we just talk about testing software, which we have, and I keep pushing us away, but on this topic, we don't have a lot of people who sign up for open source communities who are experienced testers, who understand how to build testing into the pipeline, who understand how to test applications and can teach and mentor. So I think that the testing community has some work to do to really get themselves elevated in the pipeline.
What's your URL for your open source project, Tracy?
Ortelius.io. ORTELIUS.io.
Oh, you're gonna have to spell that.
There.
Put it in chat.
I did.
Okay.
But there's so, I mean, I know that Jenkins has some core contributors who are testers, and they've done a really amazing job. And some of them have, those are the adopters oftentimes, and they have been elevated up the kind of the leadership chain within Jenkins. But I don't see it in many of the open source communities that I work in. I just don't see a lot of testers contributing, and I would hope that they would start doing so.
Yep. We have a participant raising their hand. Well, he gave us a thumbs up. I'm not sure what raising there. Maybe he was just testing out the chat window. But one of the other participants said something, and it triggered in my mind. And we're coming up near. Well, we still have some minutes left. How do we define what is quality? Is it something I'll know it when I see it? Right? They want to know, they said user experience is part of quality. Yeah, I don't, no disagreement here. But how do you know you've delivered quality? I mean, where is it, I hate subjective. I need objective. How do I know, is it, and really, I think to me, that's part of the role of QA, right? That's why we assure quality assurance. But how do we know it's quality? In what way makes it quality? Is it, the ultimate user giving it the thumbs up, or is it, how do we know what quality is?
It's the user getting the value out of it that you intended it to have.
Fair. I'll say, okay. Lee, what do you think?
Like the musical chord that went with that answer. That was
that was the angels singing, from up high. Yeah.
I was going to say that it's kind of like proving the opposite of, right? You can't unprove something. Does this exist or not exist? And it's proving a negative. You can't prove it, but you can look at data. You can see the results, whether that's users getting the value they expect, whether they're giving your company money continuously and they keep doing that and your user base keeps growing, or whether they complain, whether they ask for features you don't have, whatever it is. There's data you can get that is indirectly related to whether you're delivering quality. But I don't know if you can ever prove quality. Just like you can't prove security. Prove my software is secure. Well, the only way you can prove it is if people don't break into it. Well, the moment someone breaks into it, it's not secure anymore, right? But you can't prove the negative, but you can use data at various levels to give you a qualitative analysis of whether you're meeting your quality objectives.
Yeah, and every step in the pipeline should have that data. There should be you should be collecting data at every single stopgap. Now we deliver software all day long in a microservices environment. That's even going to be faster. So we're going to have to get better at doing this. But gathering the data and being able to react to the data where you can see where you're having these anomalies, whether it be in the code, whether it be in the build, whether it be in the deployment. Once you start gathering that data, I think you can start understanding if you're improving the process. But I think that proving quality can be really challenging. As Lee said, it's hard to prove security because somebody's going to figure out a way to break into it.
Agreed.
I always think of it as, qualities in the eye of the user, right? It's a perception by the person who's getting the value or trying to get their expected value, whatever it may be. May not be what you built it for, but what they think the value is that they're going to get out of the software, and they'll either use it, buy it, move on to the next thing, or continue. That's ultimately what matters.
I like what participant 660 wrote here. Quality is the extent to which it meets relevant requirements consistent with standards, how much and how well. It's a good one too. Another one, quality means object is perfect as per client requirements and their expectations. So it's only as long as it meets what the client wants, it's good, right? I don't have to be the fastest runner here. I just got to be faster than you.
I worked in construction, and the foreman always said, "Good enough for who it's for," meaning that's what they expect.
Yeah.
And it could have been great quality, be way too late. Now I need to change.
That adds a fourth dimension, right? Now there's time. Into the Twilight Zone. Hey, you know what? It's about that time of the show though where I got to announce our 4 Amazon gift card winners. Cody, if you've got them handy and you want to pop them out,
put those in chat.
If we could put them in chat here. They are in chat.
Yes, Alan, our 4 winners are Matthias C., Lynn M., Laura J., and John B.
There they are. Okay. Congratulations to the 4 of you. Cody will be reaching out with your gift cards. We thank you for participating. So, in fact, I want to thank all of this was a great audience today, wasn't it, panel? We got some great feedback, some great comments, questions, thoughts. They sounded really clued into this topic. So, thank you all for participating in that. I'm not ready to wrap up just yet, though. We still have a couple minutes here. Another good one here from participant, 313. Good enough is also called minimum viable product these days, right?
Yeah.
And
we haven't talked about MVPs, but yeah.
No, we haven't. And I don't know if that's exactly synonymous with quality either. I still remember.
Arguably, it should be, right?
Should it?
An MVP. Yeah, well, if your goal is to build the minimum thing that you need in order to meet the customer requirements, that's quality, right?
Everything else is waste.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would argue an MVP has to be quality. And whatever level of quality is expected, which may not be perfect quality, but
yeah, I think as an industry we've bastardized that MVP concept.
I agree 100%.
And we do take a look at it and say, oh, it's a low quality version of what we ultimately have. When the original idea was it's functionality, and it's the starting point by which we're going to start launching experiments and start learning and start building from there. But they're not low quality versions of those. The highest quality that can exist on each of those things that you ship. Not the MVP of a car is not a low quality car. It's a bicycle or a skateboard or
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes.
Don't you guys remember RAD?
Yes.
Rapid Application Development.
Oh, yes.
That meant get the lowest level product out the door and let the end user start experiencing it and pushing back feedback into what they want to see.
Isn't that called the public beta now? We didn't do public betas, but again, the audience, we have a killer audience today. MVP is not necessarily quality. It simply means what was possible to deliver. I'll take an amen to that, right? Within a given time. I think quality maybe is in the eye of the beholder. Another participant says, what if the customer demands a level of quality that is objectively garbage? Well, if your definition of quality is it makes the customer happy, I guess that's quality too. Is there an objective quality over and above what the customer wants? We answer to a higher authority, as some kosher hot dog commercial used to say. I don't disagree with that either, by the way, right? One man's quality is another man's garbage. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Garbage in,
true,
garbage
you
out.
know. If we think about some of the bigger tools that we're using right now, you know, when Kubernetes first hit the street and people started playing on it, it was far from perfect, far from perfect. And we kept, as a community, kept pushing back, and the open source developers kept adding features, locking it down, securing it. So it, you know, I guess you'd call it a fail fast method. So getting that MVP out and getting new features added to it, cleaning up problems that it's having, may not be considered bugs. It may be considered a tool evolving.
You'll never know if you have useful software if somebody doesn't use it. No type
That's so
Exactly.
true. The tree in the forest. Hey, we've got another QA here from participant 440. And again, this is a common refrain I hear from developers and folks a lot. How do we push back on the assumption that the customer is always right? In my experience, the customer is wrong the vast majority of time, but maybe that's because they have a strong tendency to stay out of the requirement space and into implementation.
Well, I can tell you when the fat man in the boardroom sat on my keyboard, I went back and created a trap for every single key on the keyboard because he was right. And I had to, that was the customer and that's what he wanted.
Well, maybe
yes.
that is the lesson, right? How do you push back on the customer? You don't. You know, everyone has their Jerry Maguire moment,
You know,
but Adam, get
there's also customers and there's customers, right? There's customers that are more likely to be called clients, where what you're doing is geared specifically to what they're asking for. And there's customers like, well, I'm building this new product, I got this idea, and I just know people will want it. And you're trying to build something that will draw people in. And it's those are different environments with different sets of expectations and different customer expectations and different knowledge about what those customers want. And one, you know exactly what the customer wants. They're telling you and they're paying you for it. And the other one, you're trying to guess and hope that you guess right to bring that they're going to buy your product. And so I think it's different in those environments as well.
It definitely.
And the trick there is to listen to what the customer is asking for, not listening to what they're saying. You know, if you have a seafood restaurant and everybody that asks for a non-seafood dish, you make exactly that dish over and over again. Suddenly you don't have a seafood restaurant anymore. You have a hodgepodge of a restaurant. But if you hear that lots of people are asking for vegetarian dishes, for some reason they're coming to a seafood restaurant, but you're getting lots of requests for variations of vegetarian dishes. Hey, maybe put a vegetarian dish on the menu, and that's listening to your customer and making them happy.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely. Hey guys, we're right here at the top of the hour. We're actually probably over, or we're coming up on top of the hour. Tracy, Adam, Lee, thank you so much for what has been a great panel. I want to really, again, guys, I mean this sincerely. What a great audience! What great comments and thoughts. I learned a lot listening to seeing what you guys typed up. Mitchell, I'm sorry I forgot to introduce you in the beginning again, but I'm going to give you the last word. Take it.
I think that's the anti-pattern we're in. That's okay. It's all right.
Okay.
You know, the value out of this for me is the different perspectives we all have. It isn't one answer to one thing, and it's most important that we learn from each other and learn from our experiences. So, and I think that's what DevOps Unbound does. Not to kind of plug our own thing here, but that's the fantastic thing about bringing these experts together. So, what a privilege to listen in and be a part of it.
And I just want to mention one thing. Next Tuesday, if you're interested in this topic and you want to continue with it, next Tuesday, the topic is test less quality over quantity. So some of you over there that have been saying testing slows me down, maybe that's a show for you to continue the conversation.
And by the way, that'll be
That
next
great.
Tuesday on Techstrong TV, which starts around 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. But you can play it on demand anytime after that. During that, you can just click right to it, and it'll be available on Techstrong.tv as well as standalone. So do check out that episode next Tuesday, guys. Thank you all. Thank you all for attending. Many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring this. Fantastic
Definitely.
series of
Thank you.
discussions. Catch us next Tuesday. Catch us on our next roundtable in the new year. For those of you who we don't get a chance to talk to, have a merry, happy season's greetings and happy, healthy New Year's, and keep writing quality product. It's important. This is Alan Schimmel, and we're out.